It's Rivals Phase 3, and we're doing oil washes. So if you're caught up in the narrative right now, Talsathan has taken the spears and the archers, the citizen soldiers, to meet the chaos threat head on, but he called for a rally of the Fireborn. So this is the units, the quintessential units that will define this force. So I want to make sure I took a little bit more time and made them a little bit more special. So what I have is the cavalry. So I'm using some old Dragon Prince models to count as silver helms, and then I'm adding that in, and I'm going to paint them all similar to look like Dragon Prince but silver helm style, and then the new plastic Dragon Princes for the Dragon Princes. So I'm going to start that contingent, and then a little bit of reinforcements for the spearmen. So let's get into it. The first thing when people see these high elf models this high elf force that I've started, is they're kind of dirty elves, which is not really like everybody's cup of tea. But I figured if you look at the inspiration picture, and also that they come from Calador, that they could be a little bit more dark and sooty and gritty type of gritty elves. So but I get asked a lot how I got that, how I pulled that effect. So I'm going to show you here how I use the oil wash. I'm going to dive in a little bit more in depth on some of the specifics, some of the practices I use, and just try to give you a full sense of how to get the most out of an oil wash. And stick around to the end, because there's something really cool that you don't want to miss. So the model is prepped here, airbrushed, contrast paint. If you want more details, check out my other videos. Now this is the secret sauce here, is burnt umber oil paint. So I have a dollop of the oil paint there on my palette, and then I put paint thinner in 2 of the reservoirs here, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now the big question you always get is, well, how much do I thin my wash? How much oil do I put in? How much paint thinner, etc.? And it really just depends. And that's the beauty of doing this as opposed to just doing an acrylic wash, is you can make it thicker, you can make it thinner, you can just play with the attributes of the oil paint. So you see here, like, I'm looking for a really thin wash that just immediately goes into all the recesses. I haven't prepped this with a gloss varnish or anything like that, so I really just want this to flow nicely. So I'd say it's a much thinner consistency than I would maybe shoot for, but I just want it to be thin and go into the recesses, and I don't have to really wipe it or babysit it too much. You can see here I just dot it, and it just flows into every crevice. I'm literally just throwing this over the entire model, not being sparing at all, just slapping it down. So I just finished laying all that down, and I'm just giving the model a once over here, checking every angle, checking all the details. So there's spots where there's a little too much pooling, areas where I want a little bit more, and it just has a long working time. You can do this for 20 minutes after you've applied it. So don't be afraid to come back in and mess around with it. It's not going to tear the same as like an acrylic wash. It has a much better working time, and even if you lift some of it up, you can just throw more back down and just keep working back and forth. So I'll show you how I apply the wash over a few more models here, and just slapping it down, checking it. But really, this is so low stress. Just let the oil wash do its thing. So the last thing here is I'm just going to pull out a little bit so you can watch how I I work the palette and the paint again. And that initial mix that I did in the first reservoir covered about almost 3 models. Didn't quite make it through the third. So you see here, the wash is just a little bit too thin. So I add a little bit more oil paint to it. And then as I work it a little bit more, I realize it's a little too thick now, a little too much oil paint to it. So I use that other reservoir to just quickly thin out my brush, pull it back into the main reservoir, and I can just keep working. Don't want to slow down here. I don't want to be too picky about it, but I want to have everything on the palette ready to go. So you can kind of just see how I work, and I move quickly. Less than an hour just to throw this oil wash down on 12 cavalry models. So I'd say that's a pretty good use of time. So I let the oil wash just sit overnight. I didn't touch it anymore. And the other question you ask, or you get asked all the time, is, do you varnish? Do you cover? And again, it really just depends. Like, I didn't prep this with gloss varnish. I know that's something that a lot of people recommend you do. It just helps the oil run into different areas. And I just did this straight over airbrushed or contrast paint or express paint, express colors in the case of the silver. But I think that just gives it a little bit better surface to adhere to. And I'm not trying to do any more with like the shadows for the most part. I'm just trying to highlight up from there and just quick pointed highlights. I think the only exception is the steel here with the non-metallic metal steel. I give it a little bit more coats and layers and whatnot, but looking just to leave the oil wash alone in the recesses and just highlight up from there. So I didn't varnish this, mostly because it was 3 days since I applied the oil wash to when I could actually start painting again, and I didn't want to delay to let a varnish dry or anything like that. I just wanted to get right to painting, and the oils were dry, and so I just jumped right in. And this just goes to show you don't have to varnish after using oils. It really just depends on your workflow when you apply the different steps. If you want to do the oil wash at the end of a session and let it sit for a day or two, then feel free to just jump in and start highlighting with acrylics again. If you're planning on just painting all day and want to start with an oil wash, just let the oil set for a little bit. Make sure the thinner is evaporated mostly, and then you can throw a varnish down, let that dry, and then just get back to painting. So whatever option works best with you and your workflow and the finish you want to have, these are all options. I just think the oil wash is so much better than an acrylic wash. It just has so many good properties that should definitely be explored, and you should try it out. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I'll respond down there. If this is your first time seeing the Old World Rivals series, I'm speed painting 2 rival factions, the High Elves and the Warriors of Chaos. The primary color for the High Elves is yellow, and the primary color for the Chaos faction is magenta. So these colors sit opposite each other in the color wheel, so they should complement each other when they are arrayed against each other. To unify the 2 forces, there's really 2 main things. I'm basing them the same way, and I'm using this burnt umber wash on both, so they're set in a similar setting. The other challenge, if you will, is I'm trying to do non-metallic metal in as few steps as possible. So for the steel parts, I used Payne's Gray with blue white from Pro Acryl, and then for the gold here, it's just ice yellow. I'm just looking to do 1 highlight step and make it look as close to metal as I can. Obviously I could add more to this, but I'm just trying to do a speed paint and get the biggest impression I can with as few steps as possible. For the steel, I do 2 or 3 highlights just because you have to do that. And you can see where I lay down each of the highlight steps to make it look like metal. Last step here is just to highlight the cloth with off-white. This is a color from AK Interactive 3rd Gen. So, like I promised, here's something fun. The Fireborn get the honor of having Andrognir on their heraldry. Who's Andrognir, you might ask? Well, that's Anerion's dragon, probably the most famous and greatest dragon in the history of the world. Now, if you look at this like I did, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. But I'm going to give you a few simple steps to be able to attack complex freehands like this. Step 1 is the gummy bear stage. Start with a mid-tone and just block in the real basic area that you want to cover. In this case, it's the neck, the mouth, the wing, the belly. So with the gummy bear done, now I can start to add in some more details. I painted the spines along his neck and then a little bit of the start of some on his face. With the mid-tone done, now I like to go up to like a mid-highlight stage. So I'll just add a little bit of blue-white in this case and just start adding the impression of where the highlights will be. Your natural tendency might be to try to do all the dark lines like you're sketching or drawing a picture, but when you're painting, I find it's best to work up and then work back. So this is my first pass with the highlight, and I just work back and forth with the mid-tone and the highlight, just trying to refine the shapes a little bit better. You can see I added the teeth and the face horns. Now I come back in with the dark color. In this case, it was just Payne's Gray, but I'm just adding all the shadows and all the lines that I want to have in there. From here, you can just refine it as much as you feel like you need. Add more darks, add more lights, and call it good. And here's the final result. So there you have it. Phase 3 is done for the High Elves. 42 hours total for those models. That's the same amount of time it took me to do both factions for Phase 1 and Phase 2. So a lot more work was put into these models. Now they're cavalry models, they're bigger, but I'm happy to say that this is probably the biggest part of the faction finish. So stay tuned for Phase 3 for the Chaos faction, and then we get into some fun stuff. I'll see you then.